right, we are back with our shock comparison. We got them tore down another level here. This way you can see the valving. You can actually see the internals of the shock. You can see all the guts and see them laid out there in all their glory. One of the things we talked about earlier was the size of this jet in the Pro Action shock. When you turn the clicker, it opens and closes this hole. So how much affects how much oil flows in this way, out that way. On brand L, they do it a little bit differently. So the brand L, as we were looking at before, Pro Action shock piston, brand L shock piston, kind of a smaller piston, little different shims, little different bend rate on the shims. What they do is they have this tube that goes internally. So if it's basically just straight down inside the shock, this tube goes on the outside of that tube. So what's happening internally is this piston is riding up and down through here. That's controlling your compression and your rebound stroke with the valving. Then as far as when you do the adjustment, as we open and close this, these mount in here side by side. And then the cap, as you can see, kind of the bottom cap here has a hole here and then a smaller hole. So as this goes down inside here, this goes this way. The shaft will go, the cap will go down over this way. So as you're doing your adjustment, what happens is the oil's flowing through the big tube, through the little tube, and through the head. So as ours is coming down through the shaft and blowing out the side, this is coming through and just circulating this way controls, this knob controls how much pressure that's gonna be. As we go clockwise or to the higher number, that shuts this off a little bit, makes the oil go through a little bit slower. If we go counterclockwise, that opens this up a little bit, lets the oil go a little bit faster. That's gonna make it softer on the compression. Clockwise is gonna make it stiffer on the compression. It only affects the compression stroke on this one. Now, we're gonna get down and we're gonna start looking at a little bit of the valving. So on brand D, as I mentioned to you before, they got this little valve on the top. As it opens and closes this way, forces more oil through the piston to make it stiffer and slower. On the rebound stroke, pulls this way, opens that up, lets it bleed off, lets the oil bleed back out through. Now, Pro Action, you're looking at this many shims. This is your 3-stage valving, which is what Pro Action has been famous for since 1977. As you can see down here through the stack, we start off with a bigger shim, taper down to a small one. We come back to a bigger one, taper down to a small one. Then we come back to our third big one and taper down to another small one. So this is your first stage. That's your first stage. Everything here, these first 2 shims are really light. You can see how easy they are for me to bend. So these 2 bend, this one supports it, that one supports it, this little one supports it. So basically what's happening is your 2 shims, the big one starts to bend, the ones in between give it a little more support and something for it to bend over. So by the time it gets to this little one, we have that much room for that to bend and open. Once it gets through this stack and this big washer bends over the littler ones and folds into this next big one, that's when we start into the next stage. So then it plays down through this one, smaller, 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 folds down. Once this stage is exhausted, we get into the last stage. Now the last stage is the stiffest stage. That's what keeps you from bottoming. So as everything folds into here, you can see these shims get a little bit stiffer as we go down towards the bottom, where those get pretty stiff where you can't hardly bend them. So the deeper you get, first stage, real nice road vibration, aggregate, that kind of thing. These shims, these 5 shims here are moving real fast up and down, opening and closing real quick to pick up the small bumps. Step up on the bridge, you drop off, the pressure increases. This big one finally folds into this one. This picks up the second stage. Third stage is the heaviest. When everything else folds into here, that's what keeps you from bottoming. Now, as we switch the other direction and the oil starts going the opposite way through the piston on the rebound side, we use a 2-stage rebound system. So this would be basically here, starting from your piston, comes up, then we have the small shim here. So these are your first 3. That's the first stage of your rebound. 3 of these pretty stiff, pretty, a lot stiffer. That one gets a little bit later, but these you see how stiff. So that way, when you're at the bottom of the rebound stroke, when it first starts coming back, it comes back real slow. Then after you get through this next section, we start into the second section. Once these are exhausted, we fold into here. That keeps you at the bottom for a second. Then as it comes up through the stage, brings you up out real nice. That's what controls your rebound. That's what keeps it from coming up and kicking you in the butt and trying to knock you over the front end. So Pro Action 3-stage valving. There are other companies that claim 3-stage valving. For instance, brand D right here. You can see on their shims, they got considerably less shims in here. Their big claim to fame is trying to control the flow with that little valve, as I was saying there. So on your compression side, you basically have these couple shims that help hold it up. Which you can see big, little, littler, 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 stop. We don't go into the next stage. We don't go into another big shim. That's 1-stage compression all day long, no matter what anybody tells you. So that's a single stage. Same with the rebound. Big, little, 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 little. We don't go back up, so it's a single stage rebound. On brand L, what they use is that's their compression stack, that big old hard washer there. That is their rebound stack, about the same, a little bit lighter. That's what goes on these pistons. So basically all this side is doing is on a compression stroke, the oil comes down through your piston, that opens up just to give you a little bit of control. They're controlling everything here with the spring and with the adjustments. So the brand L, very little going on valving wise. It basically just opens and closes on each side to give it a little bit of resistance and help replenish the system. The other thing throughout on the interior of the shock is if you look at the pistons themselves. So the Pro Action piston is right here, as you can see here. The top landing, see how that's raised up a little bit right here? That's your rebound side. So this first shim on the rebound is coming right here. So that's closing off the rebound side. So as the stroke's going this way through the shock, the oil is pushing down, coming through these side holes that aren't covered, then out the bottom. Then on the bottom, what you'll have here is you have a bigger shim here on your compression stack, and as the oil flows through there, the shims are what starts going through your 3 stages. Multi-port piston and hard anodized. Again, hard anodized, high quality metal piston band. This won't contaminate your oil. The landing where the shims, from the shim snapping open and close, won't get any wear, won't get any ridges. It'll stay real nice and real consistent. On brand L, you're looking at the smaller piston, like I said. No anodizing, no nothing there. So that at some point, as this shim, keeps moving and snapping back and forth on there, opening and closing, at some point it's going to wear a little ridge around the edge. Just give you a little bit of wear there, a little bit of oil contamination. So we went through here on this one. Like I said, everything's single stage. Same with the piston here, kind of the piston design. This is your compression side compared to that as a compression side. So on here, your one flat washer goes on here. As the oil's coming down through, that moves this way with the rest of the valving to help us control your compression stroke. On the rebound, you have this shim goes here. They keep this open inside there basically so that the oil can flow down through, then come up, open that shim. Where the Pro Action comes through from the bottom, you see how there's a little landing right here, it sinks in. So once this shim is closed, that leaves this room. So the oil will go in through that hole, cut up this way, and then come out the rebound hole. Once it comes out there, our valving's on the top, is controlling it here. On this one, basically as it's pushing up through, there's nowhere, really, it just kind of replenishes on the side there a little bit. Then in a rebound stroke, lifts up. And again, this is controlling most of what's going on the rebound side. So as a rebound stroke comes up, this opens up, lets the oil flow through the shaft, through that hole, and kind of gives you the softer compression. The other difference is a base plate. Pro Action base plate, brand L base plate, brand D base plate. So basically we got 2 flat washers, flat on both sides, flat on one side, tapered on the top. The reason we use a taper as opposed to a flat washer, we could save tons of money by just putting in a flat plate in there to let everything fold against. What this does, so now if you can kind of picture, as this is coming down with your stack of shims on top of there, when you get to the bottom of the stroke, that little bit of a taper gives the outside of the shims a little extra room to bend. So it gives us a little more timing in the shims, a little more duration, lets it be a little smoother on the stroke. With these, the flat base plates, once this folds into it, it just basically folds in, stops. It doesn't give any extra room, anything there. Ours is basically, we made it this way with a little bit of taper. Just gives, like I said, a little more duration and as far as the oil flow, and helps with the compression stroke. It makes it a little more forgiving right there at the end, gives a little extra room to bend. So that covers basically everything with the piston, the shims, the 3-stage valving, and your choice. All 3 shocks, they're all high quality shocks. They do everything, everybody's shooting for the same goal, we just do it a little different. Like I said, brand L, oil only, so that shock should be a couple $100 cheaper than any shock with nitrogen in, no matter if it's a Pro Action, a brand D, or a brand anybody. Price-wise, though, they are pretty comparable, about the same, all 3 of these. So this one just built a little different. Non-anodized, basically body where the piston rides. This one has the anodizing on the inside, a little bit rougher than the Pro Action. And the Pro Action ultra smooth coatings on the inside, hard anodizing on the outside, the adjustment at the bottom, true 3-stage valving. You can see it right here in the table. There's kind of proof in the pudding as far as the valving goes. True 3-stage valving compared to, you know, other people that may have 3 different adjustments, but it's really not true stage. So here you go. That's a little bit comparison for you. Hopefully that helped. It'll help you make a more educated decision when you're out to buy some shot.